Record.
Thank you for tuning in to the community conversation brought to you by Prototype Training System, home of CrossFit Prototype. Sam and I are back with another nutrition episode to help provide you with some education and strategies to better your nutrition while still having a social life. There's a lot of misinformation on nutrition, and we aim to provide you with some clarity. So today's topic that we're going to be discussing is going to be all about sugar. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the misunderstood. So I'm going to start off with an open-ended question, Sam. What is sugar exactly?
Sugar. Scientifically, sugar is just three elements put together. C, H, and O in a nice little hexagon structure is really what sugar is made of. But there's different kinds of sugars. So I guess we'll touch on the different kinds and then where it's found in food to kind of simplify it probably for everyone. So the three kinds of sugars are monosaccharides, which means it's just one hexagon shaped together, oligosaccharides, which is just a handful of those hexagon shapes chained together, and then polysaccharides, which is a very long chain of all those hexagon shapes stacked together. So if you think about every monosaccharide as a Lego, an oligosaccharide is just a couple stacked on top of each other, and then the polysaccharide is just a long stack of Legos. And I feel that's the easiest way to think about them in concrete examples that people have reference for. So those are the three different kinds of sugars, and then within those there's even more subsets of sugars, but I feel that's potentially overcomplicating things today, because at its base, sugar is just those three elements put together, and we find it pretty much in most of the foods we have.
Right.
Whether you're eating just straight table sugar, like white sugar that you would eat from the bag, the kind that you make cookies with, or you're eating a potato, they still get broken down into the same exact thing, which is a monosaccharide, and that's what the body uses for energy.
Right. I think when people think about sugar, or even just myself, when I think about sugar, you immediately just think about table sugar. You just think about the white sugar. So you said there's three different types of sugar, and from how you're describing it, I would assume that they all break down differently in the body based off of how quickly your body is going to absorb that sugar, depending on where it's going to come from. Correct?
Yeah. Exactly. So it takes energy to remove one Lego from a big stack of Legos, and it takes more energy to break them all up into individual Legos than it does to just take apart 5. So if you're trying to break down a chain of 20 Legos, and it's going to take more time than it does to break down a chain of 5 Legos. And so the same thing happens in the body. So if we eat a carbohydrate, which is sugar is carbohydrates, carbohydrates is sugar, they're interchangeable, right? There's different words mean the same thing. At their core. So if you're breaking down a carbohydrate, having a carbohydrate that is a polysaccharide is going to take a little bit more energy from the body to break down, and so it takes longer for the body to break it down, and so we see less of a sugar rush in the blood immediately versus something that doesn't need any breaking down.
So if you were having 10 grams of sugar from table sugar, 10 grams of sugar in, let's say 10 grams of carbohydrates coming from broccoli, and then you're having 10 grams of sugar or carbohydrates coming from a banana, things you just absorb quickly, but you're going to be taking in the same amount of sugar, whether it's from a vegetable, a starchy carb, or a very simple carb like sugar itself alone.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, I think that's where a lot of the scarcity comes from, is that what you basically just described is the glycemic index. So glycemic index, Sam, if you want to touch upon this a little bit, what's the glycemic index? And you don't have to get into the origins of who created the glycemic index, but kind of why do we have the glycemic index, and what is it kind of a representation of when it comes to what's in the foods that you're taking in?
Yeah, so glycemic index is basically an assessment of how quickly sugar comes into the bloodstream. So you just said there, right, table sugar is going to quickly enter the bloodstream because it doesn't need to be broken down, compared to, say, broccoli, which is going to have a little bit of a delay time and like a little bit of a slower release. And so glycemic index kind of ranks foods in order of things that are going to hit the bloodstream fastest versus things that are going to be slower to hit the bloodstream, and a more like moderate spike in blood sugar versus something like table sugar that's going to cause it to rise quickly, and then probably come down pretty quickly as well. And the reason we have the glycemic index is pretty much for diabetics. For someone who is a type 1 diabetic who cannot regulate their blood sugar levels because their body doesn't produce insulin, the glycemic index is important in like managing diabetes and figuring out how much insulin they need to introduce into their body, and the timing of it. It's a very like complicated system, and someone who is diabetic kind of knows it like the back of their hand. But it's a big balance of like bringing insulin into your body and then making sure that you're eating foods that balance out that insulin, because your body's not correcting on its own. Like you have to do that. So it's good to know what's happening with the sugars, and that's why you need to know the glycemic index.
Got it. Can you just kind of give us like a brief definition of like insulin and what exactly insulin is doing in the body to when it comes to blood sugar?
So insulin's a hormone. The pancreas makes insulin. And so what insulin does is it works to regulate basically your blood sugar in your bloodstream. It makes it so that you don't have crazy spikes. It makes it so that you don't have crazy lows. It just kind of is the regulator. Now, when the body doesn't make insulin, that's what happens with type 1 diabetics. And so that's why they need to artificially introduce insulin into their blood system so that their body's not going too high or too low in terms of blood sugar. Because too low is really dangerous and too high is really dangerous. And so we have like a sweet spot that we want our body to be in. And we can see acute spikes, like you can see the blood sugar rise and then come back down. The body will make those corrections. It's like you had talked about a bunch of podcasts ago about like how your body has a thermostat, like there's homeostasis that the body automatically corrects. But because some people like don't have insulin production in the pancreas, that's where like the glycemic index really comes into play.
Got it. So everything you just said sounds like they're actually good things, having an insulin spike and having understanding of glycemic index in a rough way. So let's put this into a little bit of like practicality. So if having sugar is going to spike our blood sugar levels and require our body to have to work by creating insulin, then is one type of sugar better than the other? And give us maybe a little bit of context into where, in what cases would having a simpler or a more complex sugar have its place?
So probably the best situation to have like simple sugar, like quick digesting sugar, is right around your workout.
Yep.
So if you have just run a 10-mile race, probably the first thing you want in your body is sugar, because you have used up most of the stores of energy in your body to run an extended period of time. So like a quick digesting sugar is there. I'm sure like we have some members that are like triathletes or ultra marathoners, like they know this experience. Like you eat like those Cliff Bar chews, or you have the Goo Energies, or like I even have friends that just like eat jelly beans as they're racing. The simpler the sugar, the better, because you want the body to do less work if you're doing extended periods of exercise. But you also want it if you've just done a really hard workout. For example, well, this will be released next week. So the one we did today, which is really last Wednesday, right, is like 12 calories on the salt bike in a row, really gets to some people. And so having a workout like that, where your body is just like at its breaking point, getting a quick digesting carbohydrate, really basically just straight sugar into your body, is really good for making sure that you don't get dizzy, you don't fall over, you don't become woozy, like any of those things that can happen when your blood sugar drops.
Right. Got it. So if I didn't do a workout and I wanted to have, let's say, an ice cream cone, am I going to gain a bunch of weight, or am I going to get sick? Am I going to have like too big of a blood sugar crash and die? Or, like, can you maybe talk a little bit about what happens when we have some of those things, and what does your body do to just kind of re-regulate?
For sure. I'll start this one off, and then I know you probably have some thoughts and opinions on this one as well. So when you just want an ice cream cone, interesting thing about that is it's not just sugars. Like, it's not just carbs in a lot of the foods that we crave and that we want. And so a lot of times when people are like, oh, I don't want this treat because it's whatever they say is quote unquote bad, right? Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to gain weight because there's sugar in it. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to gain weight because it's causing a blood sugar spike. What would be causing weight gain is probably not the sugar. It's probably actually like a higher fat content, a higher calorie density, a surplus of calories based in the day. You may or may not feel okay. Like, if you have no ice cream on a regular basis and then you have something like that, like, yeah, you're probably going to feel the effects of the sugar more frequent or more intensely than someone who has it on a regular basis, just because the introduction of sugar into the body is not something that it's used to on a regular basis, right? So like, putting anything into the body that's new always causes the body to react differently than it normally does. So having a little bit of ice cream, not post-workout, not like intentionally to recover from something, is, yeah, going to cause the blood sugar spike. But again, it has fat in it as well. And so having that extra macronutrient does change the way the body processes it. And I think getting into the weeds of exactly what's going on might be way too long for this podcast. But yeah, just know that, like, you're not having straight sugar in something like that. So having an additional macronutrient with the sugar does change the way that the body processes it. Now, John, I know you probably have something to touch on with relation to that. So I want to like turn it over to you and let you keep going with that question.
No, I mean, I think you kind of nailed it, is that when you're looking at anything, I mean, most people don't grab table sugar when it comes to when they actually have added sugar, I guess. And we can talk about added sugar in a minute, but yeah, like Sam just said, most of the time we're not grabbing just pure sugar. We're typically going to grab something that is going to be highly palatable, and it's going to usually have added fat. It's usually going to have other things. Maybe it's salt. Something else is going to be a combination of ingredients with some sugar that is usually going to make those things more easier to like overconsume. So when we have those things like Sam just mentioned, if you don't typically have that type of stuff in your diet, you might feel like you have a really hard time controlling yourself around that type of food. And that might be not necessarily because you don't typically have sugar. It might be because the association that you have with that type of food choice. So if that food choice to you is a forbidden fruit and you have it, then maybe we have a really hard time controlling ourselves because we've got to get it out of our system type of thing. I feel like that's like also like an association of anything else. It's usually anything that you feel like you can't have. If you have a little bit of it, then you want to kind of have more of it because, one, it tastes good, two, because you can't go ahead and do it again tomorrow. And maybe that's why some of us might struggle with having a little bit more of that. Sam, added sugar versus natural sugar. Is added sugar worse for health than natural sugar, or is natural sugar, in a better sense, better?
That's a loaded question. But by and large, like we talked about, really, if you're having an apple, it's still broken down into a monosaccharide, and the body is still processing it almost identically to how it processes something that comes into your body already as a monosaccharide, right? Glucose is what everybody hears about. Fructose is like the big buzzword of like high fructose corn syrup. Like the body still uses these sugars, whether they're natural, as in like they come from fruits and vegetables, or they're table sugar, to do the same thing, which is it uses it for energy. Too much of sugar in any capacity is never good, just like too much of anything is never good. There's definitely situations where, okay, you have an option. Let me think of an example. A soda. versus like an apple, right? Like at their core, they're still sugar. But there's definitely more stuff added to that soda that's not going to be good for you or your body by comparison of an apple, right? Like sometimes you'll crave a soda and you have a soda and that's life. But the apple also gives you micronutrients. There's vitamins, there's minerals, there's fiber, there's water content there. That like not just sugar is in something like that. So yeah, there are things that contain sugar that are going to be better for the body in the long run, right? You cannot sustain life off of just drinking soda 24/7. That would be bad for your body, bad for your teeth. But you also can't sustain life on eating just apples all the time because it's severely lacking in other macronutrients. So I
Right.
don't know if I fully answered your question. But
No, you did. And I think what you're saying is that when you have something like an apple, because of the fiber that comes along with it and the vitamins and minerals, you're getting a little bit more bang for your buck when it comes for calorie. If you were to have 100 calories of Mountain Dew versus a 100-calorie apple, you know, that Mountain Dew may not hold you over very long, and it may, since it is mostly just sugar without having any of those other things that slow down the absorption rate of that sugar and the digestion, then you're probably going to have more energy fluctuations with that Mountain Dew. You're probably going to feel a little bit more sleepy and tired. But if you compare both of them, you know, you're having the same thing in a sense. It's just one is probably going to impact your energy and going to have some spikes in that blood glucose. But unless you're a diabetic, it's okay to have from time to time, but it's probably not something that you want to have all the time, just for the simple fact that if you're someone that's a regular soda drinker, it's probably a lot of wasted calories, and that's more of an association with just overconsumption of calories over time that leads to insulin sensitivity and weight gain and things like that, because we're having too much of something versus if we were to just kind of put that all in isolation. If your diet as a whole was, you know, pretty balanced and you had a Mountain Dew, it's not going to make you unhealthy. Just like if you had a diet that was filled with, you know, candy bars and Snickers, and then you had an apple, it's not, that apple's not any better for you anymore than it's the diet as a whole. Sam, is just you're probably more often than not going to want to make the choice of having something that is going to make you feel satiated after your meal versus, you know, maybe continue to feel hungry afterwards. I guess you got to put like context into why you're making the choice. If you're having a Mountain Dew because you haven't had a Mountain Dew in a while and you really want it, you want a little bit of caffeine, cool. If you're hungry and you're like, I'm going to have a Mountain Dew to satisfy me and hold me over, it's probably not the greatest choice. It's probably going to, you know, not make you, it's probably going to make you feel hungrier just because it's so sweet and it's good. And you're absolutely like, your body wants calories.
So is sugar bad for you, John?
If you're diabetic,
Diabetics
I mean, I think like you said, I don't think sugar is bad for you. I think it's totally necessary. We were just joking when Sam mentioned that workout earlier. We were saying right before we logged on to this podcast that I did that workout this morning. I was like, I hit that assault bike like as hard as I could, and I felt like after the workout, like I was like, oh man, like I felt like pretty like depleted, like I felt like a little bit of drained. But the only thing that I brought with me was a Gatorade Zero, which doesn't have any sugar. It has zero sugar. It doesn't have any carbohydrates in it, and that's exactly what my body needed. So it helped me hydrate, which is great, but it didn't. If it had a little bit of sugar, it actually would have been the better choice in that scenario. But if I were drinking Gatorade with sugar in it as a like a, you know, this is how I hydrate, then that's not the best choice, because now I'm going to be taking a lot of extra sugar when, you know, really the purpose of that would be to hydrate, not to you know, consume calories. So it's kind of like context dependent on, you know, how you look at things.
Absolutely.
Would you say, Sam, that it's probably always a good idea when someone asks you the question of, is that, you know, is this thing good for me or is this thing bad for me? Or someone says that is bad for you, you say, well, compared to what? You know, if we always put like context behind it, or, you know, when is it bad for you? Well, it's bad for you anytime. It's, well, that's just like not not true. We just told you how it's not bad for you in certain scenarios to have, a very quick, easy sugar. When if you were to go ahead and do a workout, like Sam said, and you were to have a salad, that's probably not going to be the best choice. Let's be honest. No one's going to feel good having a salad. You're not going to have the best energy. It's going to fill your stomach up. So the context of that would be, no, the salad is not a good choice. You're going to feel better having like a small bowl of cereal, like something that you're going to just digest quickly within a half hour and then be able to, perform.
Yeah.
And things that don't have sugar in them are still going to break down the sugar if they are a carbohydrate. So is sugar bad? That would be saying is fruits and vegetables bad. There's actually people that now do say that fruits and vegetables are toxic.
People tell me all the time, you shouldn't have fruit. You're a dietitian, don't you know that? I'm like, why shouldn't I have fruit? And the answer they always give me is there's too much sugar in fruit. And I say, that's ridiculous. Fruit is good for you. You should eat sugar. You should eat sugar in the form of fruit.
This is exactly why we wanted to do this podcast, because when someone says something like that, it's okay. Someone that doesn't know anything about nutrition is going to say, okay, like I don't know any different. I can't make a valid argument to that. So yeah, maybe sugar is bad. Maybe I shouldn't have fruit. Then there's more and more confusion to what the hell we put in our mouths on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And then it becomes so much harder to be consistent with our nutrition when everything that we at one point thought was either good for us or bad from us is put in a documentary the next day saying that it's going to cause a disease, when it's really hard to just make these just put things out there as like, this is bad for you. You have like at least define what is bad. Like, is this it's gonna give you diabetes? Well, what if I have a bite of chocolate? Is that gonna give me diabetes? No. Okay, so what's the dosage that you're talking about? And you can go down a whole rabbit hole of I'm getting worked up over here.
You are. Well, because this is the stuff I think that like we pride ourselves on like being nutrition experts, and like we are very science-based when it comes to our nutrition recommendations. And there's just so many people out there that see something once or hear something and either misinterpret it or don't look into the science behind it. And then misinformation gets spread. And then we spend more of our time combating misinformation than providing nutrition education, it feels like. Because there is so much misinformation out there. And sometimes it's like not, malintent. Like when I was working in the nursing home, we did it like, I heard this story about how when people are in nursing homes, exercise goes down and weight gain is an issue. It leads to bed sores. It leads to a whole bunch of other health issues. So like for the people in the nursing home, like we don't want to see weight gain. We do weight checks a lot. And the dietitian there had told me that she had done a presentation on like them choosing angel food cake over pound cake because angel food cake was going to be better for them in the long run, just because it was like lower calorie. And then the ladies went and told their families that angel food cake is so good and they should eat it every day, right? And so there's like, sometimes it's like not meant to be like spread of misinformation. It's just that like people take the wrong message out of things. And so we spend a lot of time going over that and changing the misinformation and like providing the actual nutrition information. For anyone wondering, you can have angel food and pound cake, but they're still cake at the end of the day. Pound cake just has a pound of butter in it versus angel food cake, which does not.
You just remind me. I mean, it is so easy to go ahead and just like spew misinformation just by like just making things sound just somewhat believable. Have you ever heard of The Man Show with Jimmy Kimmel? It was like the first thing he was on before he ever had his it's probably like a 15 or 20-year-old show. Anyways, him and I forgot what the other guy's name was, like Adam something. Anyways, they go to the mall and they set up a stand. It's just like a chocolate stand, and they like advertise it as a weight loss food. And they got all these people to believe that like eating chocolate was gonna help them. It was called the chocolate diet, and they got all these people to like, even do like little bits where it's like it really works. And so their whole pitch was like, if you eat the chocolate, your mouth's gonna have to go ahead and really get a good workout by chewing on this, this hard chocolate. And because it is so sugary and condensed with calories that your body's going to have to work so hard to burn those calories. So it's actually you're going to burn off more calories than you put into your body. So they just like made it sound so ridiculously dumb that some people actually were like, I'm in. And, and it was, I mean, it just reminded me of that because you just said like, uh, they, uh, they looked at this cake as being good for you
Mhm.
when you're just like you're labeling one food in itself, and it's like, okay, but like there's no magic pill. Like we know that there's no magic pill. If there was, like we'd all probably be everyone, whoever comes up with that pill is going to be a millionaire.
Mhm.
And everyone just puts out either a little book on something with not just most of it is going to be like very biased towards their beliefs, where it's going to be very loosely based on scientific evidence. And if there is scientific evidence, it's usually not going to be very accurately measured. A lot of times there's small studies that people might sample, and they might be on like rats, might be on something like this, where they give a rat 10,000 grams of sugar, and then you see that it had these blood sugar issues. And it makes sense that you gave a little tiny small animal like 100 times the amount of something that it should have, and then you write a study on what the results were. Like those things are good in the sense that you can see that if you have like an excessive amount of something, that it can be toxic. But that's where we go ahead and we kind of get confused on, okay, this ingredient that's in an apple is toxic, but no one's dying from eating apples. So it's just like having to knowing who to listen to, and also knowing how to be able to be more of a critical thinker. I think that's the thing that most people struggle with most, is being able to critically think. They hear something, this caused cancer, oh my God, I can't have this anymore. And there's no like, further investigation, or you search for what the result is you're looking for, versus, trying to find an overwhelming amount of evidence that that is actually going to be a fact. And that's where I feel like a lot of the misinformation comes from, is you hear something, so you search, is um, is turkey going to give me cancer? Turkey is going to give you cancer. This is why. And then it's like a whole big thing where it's really, I mean, the only reason why I said that is because deli meat, if you have a little bit, if you have turkey deli meat, um, it has an association with colon cancer. I'm using this as an example because this is a very like specific thing. We all have what am I looking for? We all have we can all possibly get colon cancer.
Mhm.
Having turkey deli meat can increase your odds of getting colon cancer by like 0.25. So you have less than a 1% chance relative to what you already have of getting colon cancer. So is it the best thing to put into your body? It's been shown that it's not the best thing, but if you have it from time to time, it's not probably going to be that detrimental to your health. But if you hear that one thing of this can lead to a disease, where you don't really understand like the full story, it can be scary. And then it's okay, I don't want to have that anymore. I don't want to have sugar anymore. I don't want to have this. I don't want to have eggs. I don't, maybe I'll just start smoking cigarettes. I actually heard it's good for me now. Like, like it's so hard to go ahead and like know, like, where the wind's blowing. That, this is why, like, it's probably not a good idea to just listen to one person. Like, even what we say, like, don't take our word for every little thing. Go listen to other people, and try not to listen to someone that says that this is a definite, or this is a, an absolute. Like, you always want to listen to people that have like that kind of put context behind what they're talking about when it comes to anything. If you listen to or watch a documentary and it's about, how something is bad for you, you can assume that that's not going to be giving you, all, you know, the pros and cons anymore. It's just going to give you all of their bias.
Mhm.
And then you leave the documentary like, okay, cutting all that out of my diet. And then it's just one more thing to be confused about.
Yeah.
Anyways, went on a little bit of a
Headline
roll.
is sensationalized. Like if you just see a headline of like, this will kill you, that's scary. It's probably not true.
This is toxic. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, no, anytime that you see that, like this will increase your risk of this by X%. Well, what was the percentage it was at before? You know,
right.
like increasing by 10% when you're already at 90% brings you to 100% chance of something happening. Increasing by 10% when the original chance is 1% is not as significant, you know? So it things are written in a way to sell you things, to get you to drastically change your habits, where a lot of times the science shows something completely different. And if you read into it, it's not just a headline. There's more to the claim. And that's what we're trying to to get at, of like, is sugar bad for you? Well, no, despite probably seeing a headline a time or two or 10 that sugar is the worst thing that you can have in your diet.
Right. No,
Yeah,
100%
we
agree.
could go on so many tangents about all of this.
No, 100% agree. Yeah. So, I guess best thing for us to do is to summarize what we
Mhm.
talked about.
Yeah, John, go ahead
Um,
and summarize everything.
All right. So to summarize, sugar, when you intake it, whether it is from table sugar or it is from a fruit or vegetable, is going to, in the process of your body digesting it, is going to break down. Your body's going to break down carbohydrates into sugar, which your body is going to use for energy. So having something that is you know, mostly just sugar and having something that is a little bit more complex, you're probably going to have a different rate of digestion, which also is associated with not feeling as hungry as fast and probably not having as big of a spike in your energy throughout the day. So kind of how we use those things. If you are running a marathon, you're going to want to have pretty much the most simplest thing, you know, Gatorade, goo. You're going to want to have that type of stuff because that is very quickly absorbed sugar. So the context dependent on when you take in certain things is important. And when we have things that are that have added sugar and other ingredients, then we also want to take into account the total calorie content of that and how that can accumulate. If that is a staple of our diet, is having that over time, that, you know, the sugar itself is probably not the issue. It's probably more of how many calories we're having in a single sitting. That is probably not going to be ideal if we have specific goals. And there's really no need to be overly fearful of sugar. It's more of probably just having a healthier lifestyle in general will lead to probably not having too much of, have a good balance of having wholesome foods and having some of those processed foods that do make our lives a bit more enjoyable. Anything to add, Tim?
I think you touched on everything. I don't have anything else to add. Do you? No.
Well,
Good. Yeah, you
yeah,
summarized
I think I said
nicely.
everything I wanted to say on this one.
What?
I think I said everything I wanted to mention on this one, but
Yeah,
we're
I think
I'm sure
so.
this won't be the last time we talk about sugar. So
Yeah, no, we will probably bring it up all the time because it comes up a lot, and I'm sure lots of people still have lots of questions. And yeah, there's so much science going on behind the scenes, but at its core, sugar does good things in the body. Too much of anything is never good, but you need a balance. So everything in moderation is my
and I guess you could say too little of anything isn't good either. Too little amounts of sugar is not a good thing either. So
yeah.
if someone says sugar's bad, then you also want to, you know, take that into consideration too, that, well, we need some of it.
120 grams. per day.
120?
Yep. That's like the brain's need.
Really?
Mhm.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
Seems like a lot.
it does. But we need carbs.
Um, and I'm sure your body's like storing sugar too, like in the form of glycogen in your muscles and liver. So it's probably using some of that as well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Cool. So Sam, you wanna exit us out?
Sure. So as always, thank you for making this far. If you have questions or concerns or have any other ideas for future topics, please reach out to us. We are more than happy to sit down with you for a free nutrition consultation. If that's of interest, reach out to John or myself. And with that, we hope you have a wonderful day and we will see you soon.